All right, so yesterday as we started to introduce our topic of aquatic and terrestrial biomes, one of the things that we learned was the definition of terrestrial and the definition of aquatic. And we talked about aquatic meaning having to do with water, and we said that terrestrial has to do with land. And we spent a lot of time on aquatic biomes. And we said for us, there are three main types of water that we're going to talk about this year. Three main types of water we're going to talk about this year. And two of them are very, very easy. And one of them, honestly, is kind of easy. It's just a little bit more difficult than the others. Who can raise their hand and tell me about the three types of water? I'll take one and you give me the definition. Take one, you give me the definition. Ella. Salt water. What's the definition of salt water? This one's the tough one. Not really. What's the definition of salt water? It has salt in it. I know that's really hard to remember, so be careful with that one. What's my second one, Brody? Freshwater has little to no salt, so you can't go into high school. Mr. Bullen said it has no salt. No, Mr. Bullen said it has little to no salt in it. The third one is a little tougher, Drew, but it's a very important one, and I know we're going to see a lot of it. What was that one? Brackish water. What is that? It's where saltwater and freshwater mix in our estuaries, which we will get to pretty soon. We talked about the marine biome. We said the marine biome is the largest because it's the ocean. So of all the biomes we study, the marine biome is the largest, and that's the oceans. And it's any region on Earth's surface and covered with salt water. So there are millions of different types of plants and animals inside the ocean. It has the most biodiversity. It's the largest. It includes all the major oceans. And it has animals like sharks, dolphins, jellyfish, whales, starfish, crabs, lobsters, all of the things that you would find in the ocean are the different types of things. And we're going to look today at some of the different types of plant life we might find in the ocean and why they're very important. Again, the marine biome covers about 70% of the Earth, which is a lot of the Earth. When we say salty water, it has salt in it. Yesterday we said there's about 1 cup of salt per gallon of water in the ocean. That is a lot of salt. Scientists have said that they've discovered over 1 million species of plants and animals, and they have a feeling that there's 9 million more that we haven't even found yet, which is crazy to me. And I think a big part of it is because when you get down into the abyss and into the trenches of the ocean, those super deep parts of the ocean, number one, the pressure is huge. You have to have the right kind of submarine and stuff to get down there. And two, it's pitch black. So to study anything is really tough to do. One of the reasons the ocean is very important is because of the algae, that phytoplankton that we talked about yesterday, because it produces a majority of the air that we breathe. So that's one of the reasons why we need to take good care of our oceans. We are not playing this because you're going to skip that one. But this is where I stopped yesterday, and it's where I'm going to pick up today, and that is kelp. Kelp is one type of marine algae. Now, if you looked at this picture, would you think that that looks like a giant plant, right? Yeah. It is, but it's actually an algae. It's one of the largest algae out there. Kelp is used for so many things. I don't know this is going to gross everyone out, but it's really not that bad, including toothpaste and ice cream. You read that right, ice cream. There is some kelp in some ice cream. Kelp serves as a buffer by absorbing energy from waves before the waves hit the shoreline, protecting the beaches along the California coast from being eroded too quickly. Another important marine plant is phytoplankton. We talked a lot about phytoplankton yesterday. You can see that word right here. I'll highlight it on my screen. It won't highlight on yours, but you can see it on mine. Phytoplankton. These are tiny plants that serve as food for many of the ocean creatures, from the smallest fish to even large whales. Some scientists estimate that phytoplankton provides Earth with half of its oxygen. Half of the oxygen on Earth comes from the phytoplankton in the oceans, and I think that's a very, very important fact to remember. So kelp is something that we are going to jot down. Oceans. Oceans are part of the marine biome because they have what type of water class? Salt water. The Earth's oceans are home to most of the planet's biodiversity. We talked about that word biodiversity. It shows up, Dulce, a lot of the times on our test, and it's very important that we understand what that word means. Again, this is the 6th or 7th time now. Bio means what class? Life. Okay, so diversity means many of, so you have many different types of life in the ocean. It has the most biodiversity of any of the ecosystems. We can find mollusks, fish, whales, crustaceans, bacteria, fungi, sea anemones, and other animals. Animals have to deal with very unique living situations in all zones of the ocean. We don't need to learn those. The ocean is a very salty place, and it's often very cold. Animals have to have very special adaptations. Now, adaptations, I think, is a word from this week, or was that last week? Last week's words? You are correct, last week's words. But it is the way an animal changes in order to survive in its environment, right? Well, you cannot take a fish from the pond in your backyard and put it in the ocean. It would not live. You can't bring Nemo home and put it in your pond or your freshwater fish tank. It won't live. It needs salt water. They have adapted to live in that very specific environment. And it's important to remember that. You're going to hear about the adaptations animals have in every single ecosystem and biome we study, so it's important to understand that. Yes? Again, we have talked about this a lot, the ocean saltiness. We're not going to get into why the ocean would be more salty because of evaporation today. I'm not going to talk about ocean water being salty in one place and more than others. We'll get into that later on with the water cycle and with weather, and that's when I think that will be a little bit more important for us. Coral reef. Second type of marine biome is a coral reef. Believe it or not, if you look at that picture, all of that color where you see the fish swimming around, I know a lot of us think that that's not alive. It is alive. Coral reef is a living thing made of tiny little animals called polyps. The polyps eat algae. So if they eat algae, what type of consumer are they, class? They only eat plant-type materials. What are they called, Grant? Herbivores. Because the algae needs sunlight to survive, coral reefs are found in warm, shallow waters that get lots of sunlight. So you would only find coral reefs in shallow places. Now, you a lot of times see those coral reefs, but it's all kind of gray looking. Those coral reefs are dead. That's a dead coral reef, and it's almost like bones sitting there. Kind of what that's like is having the bones of that living creature sitting there. Estuary. Estuary. I told you about this one. If you put a star beside anything in your notes, I would put the star beside this one because this is the one where a lot of our vocabulary is going to come into play. Estuaries are very important. They are where rivers and oceans meet. When rivers that have what type of water in them, class? Raising our hands, Wesley.
Saltwater.
Rivers have salt water.
Oh,
fresh water hit the ocean, and the ocean has what type of water, Cabot? Salt water, and I have this mix of fresh water and salt water. I have that vocabulary term from this week, and that vocabulary term is what, Callie? Brackish water. It's very important. These are also sometimes called the nurseries of the sea because sometimes animals from the sea will come into the estuary and they will have their babies there because it's a little bit more safe other than the open environment of the ocean. Estuaries. Again, an estuary is a body of water where fresh water and salt water meet and mingle. We call that brackish water. Again, brackish water. I don't know if this is going to show up right here when I have the video. I think there's a little highlighter button. Brackish water. They also contain nutrients. It's very, very rich in nutrients. And again, it's another reason why it's the birthplace of many of the ocean animals. Obviously, estuaries are along a coast where a river would meet an ocean, right? We're not going to find an estuary in the playground area outside of Friendship because there's no river to meet an ocean anywhere out there. You may have been to some of these before. Bays, sounds, harbors, inlets are examples, but they don't always fit the category. Remember, if freshwater and saltwater aren't mixing, it's not an estuary. To your question about how do these animals survive, because if I'm a freshwater fish, how do I survive all that saltwater influx during the high tide? Or if I'm a saltwater fish, how do I survive all the fresh water? Since estuaries contain saltwater and freshwater, and the salt levels fluctuate, they change, they're different. In order to live in an estuary, Animals must be able to adapt to the changing levels of salt. I would jot that down in your notebook. I'm going to put that over there on mine near estuaries. They must be able to adapt to the changing levels of salt. So again, just to kind of recap, because we're coming back into the video, and if you go and watch the video, you'll see how it just stopped, and all of a sudden I start talking again. To catch the people that are watching this video at home back up, estuaries are very important. And they're very important because of the way that that's where oceans and freshwater meet. And to live there, you have to adapt to the varying levels of salt. And we said that varying means the same thing as changing. It's a new vocabulary word, even though it's not on the official list of vocabulary words. Brackish water. Now, Eva, I've said brackish water how many times over the past couple days? Just 20, maybe? If I've said it that many times, do you think that that might be a word that we, again, almost like we have up here with the brown stars, that's an important word, right? You're going to see that. A majority of the things, they try to weave in this brackish water thing. Again, and it's just where fresh water and where salt water meet. Brackish water. It's a very important word, and we'll probably do something fun with that here soon. Common animals in an estuary, seabirds, certain types of fish, crabs and lobsters. I know, and I love this about this school. Raise your hand if you go to Oak Island here. If you see some of us. And there's a lot of crabbing at Oak Island, right? Well, one of the reasons why people do all that crabbing on the other side of the beach is right there where that fresh water and that ocean water meet. There's a lot of crabs there. A lot. Like, you can sit there and just pull them out of the water all day long. And they're not smart. You can kick them back in the water and they'll go right back in your crab basket, which is kind of fun if you have little kids there because they don't know that you just did that. Skunks, opossums, raccoons, shellfish will live there, which is why the skunks and opossums and raccoons like to live there, because they like to eat the shellfish, and so do the otters, the river otters at least. Estuaries and brackish water, very, very important. Somewhere in your notes, I need you to jot down mangrove trees. Mangrove trees, they are very, very important. We have a lot of plants in the windows over here, right? But if I took salt water and poured it into those plants over there, raise your hand if you think they would be dead by the end of the week. Every hand should be up because they would be dead by the end of the week because salt water would kill those plants. Mangrove trees are super cool. You can see in this picture down here at the bottom, look at those weird looking roots. They are able to take just the fresh water out of salt water, which is really awesome. And I know that scientists are looking at how in the world do they filter that, because for us to filter salt water and make it into fresh water is a very expensive process. It'd be awesome for us to figure out how they did that, because then we could take ocean water and then we wouldn't have any water shortages in places. Mangrove trees take out the fresh water. They survive by filtering about 90% of the salt out. The really weird thing about this is the salt that they do take in, they release it through their leaves. They release it through their leaves. And so it's very weird how they do that. But they do soak up just the fresh water they need. Although they live in very high saltwater concentrated areas like an estuary. You'll see these mangrove trees in places like that. This is something I want to do, but I mean, I'm kind of scared because my luck I would end up licking something like poison ivy or something. The leaves taste salty if you lick them because they release all the salt that they take in. Kind of like you when you're sweaty. You know how it tastes salty sometimes? Yes, you do. Don't lie. You've gotten sweat in your mouth before when you were running or something. I'm not saying you sit there and lick your arms when you're sweaty or something. You've gotten sweat in your mouth before. It's salty because your body's releasing some of the salt through sweat. The mangrove trees are very similar. I want to do that one day. I do want to get a leaf off and lick it. That's very disgusting, I know. But I do want to do that because I want to see about it. I think that's very, very cool. And these mangrove trees have so many adaptations. And I know that we talked about the podcast yesterday. I think mangrove trees would be a really cool podcast. Just throwing that out there for somebody that wants to go home and learn a bit more about mangrove trees. But for my YouTube people, it is time to go. Thank you so much. You are done because the time is up.